Good morning, AP Bio. Ironically, if you need to go pee, this would be a good time to take a pee break. Not that it has anything to do with GR44, but it totally does. All right, if we look at this, our target today is to explain the function of ADH and ANP in regulating osmolarity and be able to explain the function of each section of the human nephron, or anything's nephron, as they're a little different. Now, key things we should notice for this week, you'd be going after GR45, the endocrine system, to get ahead on it, and GR48, which gets into the nervous system at first, then the 2014 FRQ, which we will tackle on the Tuesday, the 28th. The world famous and infamous question from all of history, what came first, the dino or the egg? Well, the story is, of course, the egg, the amniotic egg, because one thing that all land-based creatures would have to worry a lot about is once they moved on to land, they had to get rid of nitrogenous waste. Whereas if you live in the water, it's a little bit easier. It just kind of diffuses out of you. Keeping that in mind, I would then bring people up and I'd show, once again, the Dbags to remind you that when we're trying to figure out where salt or water goes, water will always follow solute. It will always push from a place where there's more water to a place where there's less water. And we use the Dbags because they're like the membranes inside of things like our kidneys. They determine what can pass by its size, shape, and charge. Of course, that's going to determine whether or not you have to go pee. So that brings us to a lovely picture. The slide will change of this. And it looks a lot like a snake eating a pretzel. Of course, you hopefully know that this is the human kidney. You're going to explain to me how each part of that is involved in the excretory system. Its 4 key functions better be part of that. And you're going to draw and explain how each section of that human nephron will actually do that, which means you want a whole page so you can draw this giant thing. And if you have color, that's handy for the little, red pretzel looking thing. Kind of looks bloody, right? This would be a good time to pause me and then see what you know based on what you did in GR44. And now we'll just go after it together. So if you haven't drawn it yourself, stop me now, because you can, at home. Now, key things. If we look at the 4 functions of the excretory system, one of the first ones it does is filtration. Filtration is not very selective. It's just a pressure filtering of the blood. Basically, we take our blood and we shoot it at a screen door. And when you do that, it's not that picky. It shoots out both the good stuff and the bad stuff. We're just going to use a big F, and the pen's going to freak out on our drawing, but that stands for filtration, pressure filtering. Second thing that it's going to do, of course, is you kicked out some good stuff, so you want to reabsorb it. That's reabsorption. And reabsorption is all about saving these lovely things called solutes, sugars, amino acids, salts that are necessary for your body, and the most precious thing of all, water. So we're going to use a big R for reabsorbing, saving the solutes, right? Saving the good stuff. Third thing, this is about getting stuff out, so this is about secretion. And secretion is the act of pushing out of toxins. So toxins would fit into the category of things like nitrogenous waste, ammonia, it'll kill you, or in our case, this lovely safer thing called urea. It'll still kill you, but not as bad as ammonia will. That's why we use it. Hey, urea sounds like urine. This, of course, requires energy, so that is a secreting thing. You're pushing it out of your cells. Fourth thing is most important, of course, this all comes together for the process of excretion, because it's the excretory system. Excretion is the physical removal of one of the most deadly wastes that you can produce, called nitrogenous waste. That's because, of course, nitrogenous wastes are ammonia-based, and ammonia is a base, and it will attack your proteins and, of course, denature all those things. This is the physical act of getting rid of those, so this includes peeing, right? That's why we have a bathroom pass, or it also involves things like sweating, and it can involve things like breathing. Sweating, of course, is pretty well given away because we can look at your gym clothes, especially if you go to the boys' locker room, you'll notice it smells kind of like urea, like pee. That's because when we sweat out, we get rid of nitrogenous waste as well. Not as efficiently as our kidneys, but it's enough to save us a little bit. And then people have bad breath, especially in the morning. Part of that has to do with bacteria farting. The other part has to do is you're getting rid of some urea from your lungs. But most of it's coming through these lovely structures called the human kidney. Now, if we look at this, we can see that this is the human kidney, or at least one section of it. And the kidney has different layers. The outer layer of your organs, just like your brain, is called the cortex. It's the outer skin, like the cerebral cortex. This is the kidney's cortex, right? Then we can see, of course, we call it the renal cortex because it's a kidney. There are the inner parts, which are called the medullas. Just like you've got a medulla in your brain, the medulla oblongata. What's wrong with you, Colonel Sanders? This would be called the outer medulla, and this is the inner medulla. Very creative, right? The biggest thing that we should notice is these layers is because something's changing. As we move deeper into the kidney, it goes from a very low salt content, not very salty, to very, very high in salt concentration. As you move to the inner medulla, it gets saltier and saltier. So the thing we should notice, as you move into the kidney, it's getting saltier. Hey, and wherever salt goes, water follows, right? Now, key thing, this, of course, is red because this is a little arteriole coming in here, and it's going into this little net bag, which is known as the glomerulus. And the glomerulus is the screen door. So what we do is we shoot all of our blood into this little screen door, and it pushes out all the good stuff and the bad stuff. This is the filtration phase. Now, the great thing is there's this big snake. It's like Bowman's boa constrictor is how I remember it. This is Bowman's capsule. And Bowman's capsule is going to capture that stuff called the filtrate. The filtrate is the good stuff and the bad stuff that you just forced out of there. And of course, you want to save the good stuff. So this is about reabsorbing part of it, right? Where that's going to happen is in these little tubes that are called tubules. And this is the close one. So just like in sports med, this is proximal. This is the proximal tubule. The proximal tubule's first job is to reabsorb. So it's got a bunch of channels built into it, and it's going to save some things that you need. It's going to save things like salts and sweets like sugar. And it's going to save most precious stuff, water, and this lovely thing called bicarbonate ions. Makes sense. They're how we buffer our blood. They're kind of necessary. So we try to save them here. At the same time we're reabsorbing some of that good stuff, we're going to push out actively some of the bad stuff. When we say push out, we're pushing it into the tubules because that's what we're going to pee out eventually, right? And what we push out here and secrete is things like hydrogen ions, which is good because that could make us acidic. In fact, this is going to make the filtrate acidic, and we're going to force out any ammonia that we have because that stuff's really toxic. Now, as we shove that stuff in, the filtrate's starting to get more concentrated, but then it goes down deeper into the kidney, down to salty land. In this loop that's named after some guy, I can't remember, but its name is called the descending loop of Henle. I wonder who it's named after, right? As we go down into the ascending loop of Henle, we're going to a saltier place, and that makes it very easy to reabsorb the thing that follows salt, which is water. The longer that tube is, the deeper it goes, the more water you can save. So it's good that it's going into salty land. You need to save it all along that channel, right? Then you can see it comes back up. And it's getting saltier and saltier because it's losing water as it does that, so that by this point, it's pretty darn salty so that the salt will actually push its way out of this. And that allows you to reabsorb salt. You might ask yourself, why do you want to reabsorb salt? I thought we're trying to get rid of that stuff. Well, if you save salt, you save water. As it comes back up, this is now called the ascending loop of Henle. And as it comes back up, one of the cool things about it is now it's going to come back up, back to less salty land, but your body actually actively transports and grabs onto more salt. Because the more salt you save, the more water you can save. It's kind of like why Gatorade has solutes in it, right? It's a salt drink with sugar. As it comes back up to the outer cortex, it reaches this end. This is the distant tubule, so it's called the distal tubule. And in the distal tubule, as before, this is about reabsorbing. So you got a bunch of channels in here, and what's it going to save? It's going to save salts and sweets like sugars. It's going to save water, and it's going to save bicarbonate ions to keep your buffer around so you don't, denature all of your proteins. Also, this is a chance to push out some stuff, so it's going to do some secretion. What's it going to push out? It's going to push out toxins. It's going to push out things like drugs. So this is why, of course, they give you a pee test, because your body is sensing that there's this foreign chemical inside your body, like THC or alcohol. It's going to shove it out in this spot and make you pee more to get rid of that stuff, right? That's why there's urine tests. It's also going to shoot out and push out things like potassium ions. We get too many salts in our diet, and potassium ions can throw off the way our heart and our brain function because they mess with nerves, as we'll learn later. And you're going to, of course, secrete out a bit more. These arrows should be going the other way. Hydrogen ions. Now, why do you want to shoot out hydrogen ions? Because that'll make the pee nice and acidic. And if it's acidic, that's great, because then if any bacteria try to crawl up into your urinary tract, you will burn them with acid so you don't get a urinary tract infection, a UTI, right? Of course, if your urethra is shorter, you're more likely to get that, which is why girls get it more than boys, right? A bunch of nephrons will now connect, because this is the human nephron, and those connect in this thing called the collecting duct. Not duck, duct. As those all come together, it's got all this filtrate that's collected together, and it goes back down deeper into the kidney, Well, as we make our way into salty land, it's going to reabsorb even more salts to keep the inside salty so that you can grab water with ease. It's also going to reabsorb things like, well, the easy stuff. Water's going to push where it's salty, so you can save that because that's the most precious thing here. And strangely, you're going to reabsorb some more urea. Why would you save some of the urea that you're trying to get rid of? Well, urea is a solute, and the saltier you are, the more concentrated your inner medulla is, the better you are at saving water, which is the ultimate name of the game here. Now, at this point, it's become very, very concentrated with the bad stuff, and you save most of the good stuff, and you got to get it out of your body so it doesn't, mess you up and steal your water back. So this is when it's become this stuff called urine. And that urine, of course, will then pass from this collecting duct to this part of the kidney called the renal pelvis. Kind of like your regular pelvis, it has that pelvic shape. From the renal pelvis, it will travel down through your ureter, a small tube, all the way to a collection bag called the bladder. And it'll stay in there for a while until it's nice and full. It's probably feeling like it's full right now because we're talking about it. And then from the bladder, it will go to this small tube, the last chance, called the urethra. And that's your pee tube. And then it will get excreted and pushed out of your body so that you can go about your business and drop a little bit of weight and definitely drop some urea and save some water. So pretty complex system, but really, it really is about wherever salt is, water follows. Water follows solute. So keep that in mind. That's why the design of it, of course, evolved this way. Now, we normally go after GR44 as a team. Now, of course, we'll look at it together, but you should be MVP in these just the same. And we can see that really this is about Dbags. And we did Dbags earlier to understand osmosis and that water will always follow solutes. It's a passive form of transport, saves you energy. That's why kidneys are so crucial. They're allowing more of those Dbag activity. That's why it's called dialysis tubing. It's there to replace human kidneys if you maltreated your kidneys by overworking them with drugs or you have a disease that's affected those things. Now, osmoregulation, of course, is water balancing out the amount of solutes and water that you have for your environment. That hopefully would take less energy, but you're going to have to use some energy to make sure you get things where you want. And then, of course, the way that we do that is we increase the surface area and osmoregulate with these beautiful structures known as nephrons. Hence the nephritic, right? Now, key things we should notice. Excretory system is about getting rid of nitrogenous waste. When we eat proteins, we break down the amino acids into these ammonia groups, and that could be toxic. That means that we need to get rid of that stuff. It is not egestion. That is solid waste, that is pooping, that is things like plant matter that you couldn't digest that were never part of your body. These are proteins that were in your body, you broke them down. So nitrogenous waste is all about excretion. Egestion is the solid stuff. Don't mix them up, right? If we're talking about homeostasis and osmoregulation, we're talking about the balance of ions in water. And this guy right here, the Wandering Albatross, faces that all the time. He can spend an entire year or several years out at sea and never actually run into fresh water because he's out in a big salty ocean. So how does he survive? Well, he eats fish and shrimp that are really salty, and he puts lots of salt in his body, which means he's got a lot of salt and salt water. If you tried this, you'd die quickly. But fortunately for the albatross, it evolved a runny nose. And their tube noses are connected to these huge glands that are inside of their forehead, and they're constantly wiggling their head, and this really salty snot is coming out. Now, that secretion is because inside of there's a gland that's actively pushing salt out. Well, it has blood running in one direction and the salty solution going the other, which creates a countercurrent exchange. And this allows them to push the salt out, and the salt pushes out on its own because it's flowing in the other ways, which decreases energy, and they can survive without drinking fresh water. You couldn't pull that off. Other creatures do this too. This is the marine iguana, and they're constantly sneezing. Why are they sneezing? They're sneezing because they're actually secreting the salt that they picked up from eating salty seaweed all day. And it's pretty impressive for a creature that used to live in trees and evolved to be something that swims around in the sea. If you've ever heard about crocodile tears are salty, not because they care about the fact that they ate you. It's because they're trying to get rid of the excess salt from their salty environment. But that's why saltwater crocodiles can live in salt water, where most reptiles can't. Now, that's because they are osmoregulators. Like you, they're controlling the amount of salt and solute that they have inside of their water to ultimately try to save water. The other technique would become what this worm's doing. He's an osmoconformer, which means this worm has made itself as salty as the environment so that it doesn't have to worry about water flowing back and forth. If you tried that, you would die, but the worm can get away with it because it's a little less complex body. But it's been doing it for, for a billion years, so it's all right. Now, this is back to the old question, to pee or not to pee, remembering that freshwater fish pee like crazy and saltwater fish don't pee, that's because it's all about the osmotic gradient, the water concentration on the inside and the outside. That's when we go to salmon. The salmon that come back from the ocean from a life of not peeing have to, of course, change dramatically in estuaries as they grow massive amounts of kidneys so they can pee and get rid of that. All that growth of kidneys takes energy, and that's why they eventually die from all that extra work. But if they don't, then their cells will explode. So good old anadromous fish. This also ties in the fact that different creatures, different types of vertebrates and invertebrates, get rid of different types of waste. If you're surrounded by water, you can be wasteful with water and just get rid of ammonia. That's what most fish and aquatic creatures do. But if you're going to live on land, then birds and mammals and other types of species like insects, they got to be more efficient and save water. Uric acid is the best way to save water. That's why birds and insects can live in things like the desert. Reptiles can too. But a compromise would be urea. It's less toxic than ammonia, but you still have to waste some water, but not too much water to do it. Now, key thing we should notice is this is coming from the fact that you eat, say, a steak. When you eat the steak, it's loaded with amino acids. Those break down into, of course, ammonia. And ammonia is strongly basic and can rip apart your proteins like crazy, causing a problem. So it's toxic. So what we do is we send this thing to the liver, the ultimate conversion organ. And that liver then attaches that to a thing that's built up in your blood called carbon dioxide. By combining two ammonias with the carbon dioxide, you can, one, get rid of some of that carbon dioxide, which can always cause acid problems, and you can get rid of the base. Pretty elegant design. That means that once the liver actually filtrates this, or it takes it and converts it, it has to filter it out of the body. And the way that does that is those kidneys. Now, you should notice the kidneys are kind of weird. They're one of those paired organs like the lungs. Now, why do we have two kidneys? Well, one reason we have two kidneys is it gives you more surface area, more nephrons embedded inside of them, which is important because this is simply going to transfer by the process of diffusion and osmosis. Materials are going to move from high to low. More surface area means you can do that faster, just like with the lungs. It also likely evolved because if you lose a kidney, you still got a backup one. Now, most people's lives, if they live to a long age, one of the first organs to go is their kidneys. And that's because they're working so hard all of your life. I had a cousin who unfortunately had Hodgkin's disease, and she got cancer in one of her kidneys, and they had to remove that kidney. And they were always worried whether or not she could play sports. She couldn't, because if she got hit in the kidney wrong, then she could die because she only had one backup filtration system. In addition to that, of course, they were always worried when she was going to have her first baby. Unfortunately, she was able to successfully do it, but it's likely that it shortened her life because she not only had to filter for herself, she had to filter for the baby's urea content as well. And that's why you should thank your mommy always, because first they got rid of your pee as they were feeding you. Isn't that nice, mommy? Now, key thing we should notice we talked about, it's about filtering, pushing out the good stuff and the bad stuff, reabsorption, saving the good stuff, especially the solutes, save them, you save water, secreting out toxins, especially urea, and then removing those from the body, that's the excretion part of it. And it's all happening by the process of osmosis and diffusion, right? Now, key thing we can also notice is the glomerulus is this structure. I think of it as a screen door where you're shooting a fire hose. There's your blood flow. It's going to shoot out all the things that are in the solution, like the amino acids, the sugars, and the salts, but it's going to hold on to things like red blood cells that can't fit through this thing. So that's what creates your filtrate. As that moves into the nephron right in this location, you can have two different types, the juxtaglomerular nephron, and then the cortical nephron. This one is better at saving water because it dips down into salty land and saves that stuff. This, of course, is easier to build, but not as efficient as saving those, but you can still secrete out toxins with those. So you got both built into you. Notice that we do this, we're going from less salty to more salty. You filter first, you reabsorb your water, your salts, your sweets, then you secrete out by active transport things like urea and protons so that you can make this thing nice and acidic and kill off bacteria, and then you remove it by sending it to your bladder and onwards, right? Now, normally what I'd do is I'd bring you up to the front, I'd show you a kidney, and we talk about my cousin and stuff. We talk about kidney stones and how carbonic acid can build up little crystals, and then you got to pee them out your ureter, which is extremely painful, which is why I don't drink soda. Then we would go after the hard part of chapter 44. And that, of course, is the part that's to do with ADH, renin, angiotensin, aldosterone, and ANP. So right now, of course, you should pause me while I take a drink, and you should make sure that you figure out on pages 6 and 7 what's going on with those. One thing you should notice, now that you restart me, is they tend to end with IN or own. or they have this H in them. That's because they're all signaling molecules, they're messages. And this doctor right here, of course, is looking at your pee sample, because if it's too dark, it means that, of course, you're not getting enough water in your body. If it's too light, well, then your kidneys, you might not have enough solutes. So you get a good idea of your health in that. You can also find out if any toxins are in your body. But all of those things are tied to the fact that pages 6 and 7 is about osmoregulating hormones. Hence the H, hence the N, like insulin, aldosterone, all those things, of course, angiotensin, renin. Those guys end with N because they're protein-based hormones. They're signaling molecules that tell your body what to do. It's one cell telling another what to do. Now, key thing is ADH, renin, angiotensin, and aldosterone. I made them all green here because they're all about saving water. The oddball out is the ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide is, I always remember it as always need to pee. It's the one that wastes water and gets you to pee out things like toxins, right? So another story, of course, besides humans would be this guy. This is a kangaroo rat. He lives in the desert, and he never actually drinks fresh water. And that's amazing because he's just like you. He's got to osmoregulate too. But he can survive solely on the water that's in seeds because his actual loops of Henle are much, much longer than yours. So they have more surface area to save more water, and that's why they can do it. This is a roadrunner, and the roadrunner, of course, doesn't really run into fresh water either. It gets all of its water from the scorpions and stuff that it eats, but its loops are really, really short. So how can it survive? Well, that's because it uses uric acid. And uric acid, of course, doesn't have to be dissolved in a whole bunch of water, so he can save water that way. That's why birds and reptiles have done well. So different methods, but same end game, save water, right? Now, this vampire bat has a different story. This little flying shrew loves to feed on blood. And if you fell asleep in the Amazon or in Panama, it would sneak up in the middle of the night and it would suck down as much fluid as it possibly could, which would fill it up. Now, that's awesome because the blood's loaded with protein, but it's also a problem because now that little flying shrew is really, really heavy. So the vampire bat does an interesting thing. Right after it feeds, it actually pees out very dilute urine really, really fast. It loses tons of water, which loses weight for it. Then it flies back to the roost, and when it gets back to the roost, it actually changes its kidneys, and then it starts producing a very concentrated urine, which is awesome because that means it doesn't lose a whole bunch of water, and that keeps it from dehydrating and dying. Now, how is it that the bat actually controls how watery its pee is to save its body? Well, control is all about hormones. And the most important one that you likely see on the AP or any college exam that you're looking at health systems would be ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which literally stands for not peeing hormone. So this one prevents you from peeing, decreases your peeing. The basic idea is if you're like this guy and you eat a whole bunch of salty food or you lose a bunch of water because you're sweating in the hot sun, your body releases this anti-peeing hormone, which changes the distal tubules and allows you to save more water. If you drink a lot of water, then your amount of ADH decreases, and then you don't stop yourself from peeing. You pee more and you lose water. So the neat thing about this one, because it's one of the most straightforward and easy to understand, is let's say that you go for a run in the hot sun because you're really, really bored, right? You start sweating like crazy. You're losing water, which makes your blood get salty. The hypothalamus notices that, and the pituitary gland that's just below it, the master gland, starts sending out ADH. Now, the ADH does a great thing. One, it makes you thirsty, so you drink more water. The second thing that it does is it actually changes the collecting duct to allow you to collect more water and reabsorb that stuff in. Then, of course, your body, your blood would get more watered down, less salty, and the hypothalamus would stop producing the ADH. We're telling the pituitary to do it. Now, a great way to see this going on has to do with this picture. How does the ADH do it? Well, it uses this thing called the cell signaling pathway. Basically, ADH has a specific shape. It locks into a transmembrane protein receptor called adenyl cyclase that cleaves ATP and turns it into cyclical AMP, a non-protein second messenger, which then attaches to storage vesicles, which then cause them to do exocytosis, which puts more aquaporons, water pores, into your distal tubule, and then the water can push from high to low into your body. It's almost like all that cell signaling stuff was worth something because it's how your body runs, right? Beautiful mechanism. Now, other things we can think of about, and we've seen this before, there's a lot of students inside of a class. The bell rings, they can rush from high to low. This is just like, of course, water going from a low water potential to an even lower water potential. Imagine the people or the water. Or we could think about it in terms of your eye. The outside air has a very, very low hypertonic solution. It always goes from hypo to hypo, or hypo to hyper, and so it pushes out of the eye. That's why you constantly have to blink to try to coat yourself with an isotonic solution. If we go to your kidney, basically the descending loop of Henle has it preloaded so that we've got all of this stuff built up in the filtrate, and there's your body. And the nice thing about this is what we're doing is we're putting in more doors, and that's what ADH does. By creating more doors, the water can rush back into your body, and more kids can get into the classroom at a faster rate, so you save more water. Now, more complex systems go with this thing called the Renin Angiotensin Aldosterone System, the RAS system. Yeah, I know, it sounds great. The key thing we should notice, the key component of this is Renin. Renin runs the whole thing. And this poor guy, he ate something wrong, maybe went to Chipotle, and now he's got diarrhea, right? When you have diarrhea, you're losing fecal matter, but you're also losing tons of water, and that can kill you. It can dehydrate your brain. The thing that notices that is this thing called the juxtaglomerular apparatus. I know, it's fun. It's right next to the glomerulus. It's juxta. And what it's constantly measuring is your blood volume and your blood pressure. If you lose lots of water, your blood volume and pressure will decrease. The juxtaglomerular apparatus notices that and releases its very own hormone called renin, like renal. Renal is referring to anything with kidneys. So if we look at that renin will then go in and activate this thing called angiotensin or angiosinogen to make this stuff called Angiotensin I, which then turns into activates Angiotensin II. That talks to the adrenal glands, like adrenaline, that are sitting on top of your kidneys, because there's a lot of blood flow through your kidneys. That then goes on to aldosterone, which causes you to save salt. And when you save salt, you save water. It changes the distal tubules again. So the biggest thing we should notice is renin and the RAS system is all about measuring how much blood flow you've got, and if blood flow drops, you don't have enough water, so it saves salt to save water. Now, this is different than ANP. ANP works against that, counters it. Basically, if you've been drinking too much water, your blood volume's too high, so your body will release ANP, always need to pee, or atrial natriuretic peptide, natural peeing peptide. That blocks renin, which blocks the whole rest of the system, so you don't save salt. If you don't save salt, you don't save water. So what this is, of course, is this is a nice negative feedback mechanism. Let's say you've been drinking too much water, you're getting too much blood volume. That's going to cause your body to say, hey, I need to decrease my ADH. You're not thirsty anymore. You're not saving extra water. You're going to have to pee. And you release AMP, which makes you not save salt, so you lose water, and then you go pee a lot more. As you go pee a lot more, your blood volume is going to decrease, which your hypothalamus will notice and release ADH, anti-peeing hormones, so you save water with extra aquaporons, and the blood volume decreases so that renin will be released and cause you to save salt, so you pee less. And then you go back to being thirsty because now you've, of course, need to replenish that water, which ADH is working at. Notice this negative feedback works unless you fight against it. And a little girl, unfortunately, was involved in a Wii contest where if you didn't pee for the longest amount of time, you would win a Nintendo Wii gaming thing. And unfortunately, she resisted the urge so long that she eventually went into a coma and died. Because if you need to pee, you pee, because it's making sure that you don't overswell your cells with extra water. Now, hopefully by this point, you've got the idea. The kidney is all about water following salt. As you move into it, it gets more salty. The first thing we do is we filter it, push out the good stuff and the bad stuff, reabsorb the good stuff like the water, the salt, and the sweets, push out things like urea and hydrogen ions to make it, one, get rid of the waste, and two, to make your pH of your blood drop and make it acidic to kill off bacteria, and then physically excrete it and pee it out. Now, normally in class, we take a quiz. So you should see if you can actually fill this in on your own. Pause it, see if you know this stuff. If not, go back through it. I'm sure you want to do that. And then realize that we would then go after GR43. Now, GR43 is a totally different story. It's one of the most complex systems. It's the intro to the immune system. And normally we'd spend 2 days looking at this in class because the immune system does some weird stuff that can help us to understand how that works. Like if you're like me, you suffer from seasonal allergies. Or somebody eats a peanut and suddenly they go into anaphylactic shock. What's up with that? Or we should notice that sometimes people's immune systems attack themselves, like they get their joints attacked and now they have arthritis. Or we could look at AIDS. AIDS, unfortunately, is so good at killing humans because it's good at sneaking around our human immune responses, in fact, exploiting them. And then you should notice, of course, if you get stung by a bee or punched in the face, suddenly like your face swells up or your finger swells up. What's up with that, right? Now, That, of course, what we would tackle normally in our Operation Antibody case studies, which I so wish we could do this year, with a bunch of weird events that get across the ideas of that. This year, we're not going to get the chance to do that. So instead, we'll be looking at the PowerPoints to do that and the ETDs, which a lot of them will be hitting the next ETD. You should notice that your target would be GR 45 and 48, and 2014 for the 5th of May. Man, May's coming quick. And our ultimate job today was to recognize what osmoregulation was about. It's about balancing your water and your salts, right? Your solutes, your ions and things like that. Remembering that water always follows salt. If we look at ADH, that's the antidiuretic hormone. That's the stop peeing hormone that makes you save water. And then there's the ANP, the always need to pee, atrial natriuretic peptide, which means that you don't save salt, so you don't save water. They set themselves up in a nice negative feedback mechanism so that you can balance your water. Osmoregulation. Yeah, tongue twisters. All right. Might want to watch that a couple times. Yeah, right.